Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. Going to be talking briefly about auras. Um, I'm seeing in the Clan and Alliance people running groups, and the standard build that you find online is inherently designed for you to be self-sufficient, right? But in the Clan and Alliance, people actually have options when they're working as a coordinated group. Some of you guys know this that are watching from YouTube that aren't in the Clan and Alliance, but this is just something to consider. This is going to be new information to a couple of you. When playing with people that you know, instead of just worrying about the interactions between the frames themselves, one of the things to consider that you should be considering is auras. Say you need a brief respite because you're doing shield gating, right? Uh, and your build is able to shield gate with a brief respite mod. You don't have to have the brief respite on you. You can just have it somewhere in the build. Um, in most cases, corrosive projection is the go-to, right? But one of the things you have to keep in mind is there's a bunch of aura mods, and if you're against Corpus, you don't need corrosive projection. There's a shield version of it. Shield disruption. Enemy shields reduced. Minus 18 shield capacity. If you're going against Corpus, this is what you run. But I'm still seeing people, and I caught it a couple times the other day, people running corrosive projection against Corpus. This is one of the benefits of an aura mod. I personally don't aura mod like with the changeable aura. Anything but a prime. But the primes generally get the aura forma. But one of the benefits is it allows you to swap on the spot exactly what you're looking for. So if you're doing now corrosive projection and the shield disruption are both dashes, right? But say one of the things you have to consider is to help the group out. If you're going against, say, for example, Corpus, right? We're talking about shield disruption. Um, you should try to mix, or at least if you're doing a group of three, two people take shield disruption and somebody take like a steel charge or something. If everybody's doing melee builds, it's fine. There's a bunch of stuff, even though they're not really considered meta, it, because each of the stats apply additively to each other, but the stats are applying to different things, you actually get a slight multiplicative bonus to how things work. So running, like if you're doing a 4-man against Corpus, you would take shield disruption, a brief respite, what's the other one? EMP aura. So this would be a D polarity. And then you would take like a damage aura, right? So you reduce the enemy's defenses. You could also swap out the accuracy for a corrosive projection. And I'm not really seeing these combos. Um, and these make mission running, especially with groups, significantly better. This is at the level of like swapping out a faction mod on your weapon. Like this is something where it's not so much pick up and go. Um, but when you're doing like longer runs, like I was doing like a steel essence farm the other day with a clanmate, and we were swapping out aura mods as we were changing enemies. And I got asked, why are you doing that? And it's like, well, we both had corrosive projection. Like I was running a what was it? Power donation? Not power donation. Um, growing power on a wisp because I was a strength wisp, and the other guy was running a corrosive projection. So we were getting the bonus damage for the team from the motes through fire rate and attack speed, right? We were also doing a bit of a Spectre camp because we were just trying to hang out. Obviously, what you should be doing in Warframe. But if we had another person, we would try to take a third mod or double up and do like a base damage mod, even though either do a double corrosive projection with 3 people against Grineer. You would do double corrosive with a damage mod, or do double corrosive with brief respite. But when you get into 4 people, there's actually really interesting combinations where you can apply easily to 3 different stats. So say people are running, like trying to test out melee builds, right? Steel Charge would be a must. Then you could do Brief Respite so people can still get their shield gate. And if one of the things we would consider is if we're running with, say, like a newer person, you could also run like an energy siphon, like a utility. So you would take like a damage aura, like Steel Charge for melee builds, something to deal with the enemies, like defense. So for Grineer, it would be Corrosive Projection. For Corpus, it would be the shield mod, Shield Disruption. And then you would take like a utility mod, or a utility aura for like Energy Siphon or something like that. So it's things to consider. I just wanted to bring this attention to the people from the Clan and Alliance that watch this. And I also did Triple Umbra Oberon today, taking advantage of the double affinity weekend. So these are things to consider. A lot of these smaller mods, please do not go out and buy any of these. But a lot of these aura mods that are super unpopular. Oh, these would also be another thing, is now that it's a little more relevant, bringing a scavenger aura is certainly a needed aura if one person takes it, right? So like you could also have like enemy radar, so do like a corrosive projection, enemy radar, a scavenger for your primary. So do like a rifle scavenger, and like proper utility. So like a damage, a frame utility, scavenger mod. There's ways to stack this, but when you're running with a group, consider the auras, because there's ways to make the run significantly easier. Because I'm starting to see people doing like 30-minute, 1-hour runs. Also, shout out to the people starting to do speed running. That's definitely a hole to fall down. Ayunti, who has his own YouTube channel, it finally got a sub 2-minute profit taker, so he's making insane progress. I think he's almost at my fastest run, and I find that pretty impressive. So when you're running with people in the clan, consider like utility, right? You have somebody that's dying a lot. Combat discipline, if you're running a support frame, combat discipline is really, really good, because if it's like a newer player, as they run around and kill stuff, this can be their on-kill life recovery, right? And this isn't going to be a mod that like an aura that a newer player is going to have, because this is an arbitration aura. So food for thought. Brief Respite is more of a later game aura. You have to have energy economy to be able to spam this. But if you're playing with like newer people, like if you're doing regular star chart stuff, this mod kind of becomes useless. Unless the person, like most people aren't going to have Arcane Energizes. They're not going to be running the Synth Equilibrium set. They're not going to have a Panzer setup. something where they can really get their energy economy going, right? So for the more experienced players, when you're running regular missions, this is definitely something to consider. Just obviously be careful with combat discipline, because you guys know this, if you're doing most of the killing, and you're like the carry or whatever, you can kill yourself with this end game, obviously. So I'm seeing lots of people run Brief Respite on frames that are not shield gating. Like there's next to no point of doing Brief Respite on a frame that is a health tank. For the people running Korra, like say one of the videos that I had that got a lot of traction was trying to shield gate with Korra. You know what also fixes that problem? 2 people on the team, or 3, like 2 Brief Respite auras would fix a lot of that problem. And even in the comment section, I never really saw that sort of thing brought up as like synergies within the team. Because like you had to basically bend over backwards and do a backflip to get proper shield gating. So double Brief Respite on the team fixes the shield gating issue, but that requires coordination between people. And there's also like some interesting synergies, like say if everybody runs like combat discipline, you still lose, this stacks additively, right? So you would lose 10 health on kill and your allies would gain 20. But if 4 people are running this, you would only lose 10 health on kill, but you would gain 60. Because you would be getting the benefit of 3 combat disciplines worth of health. So you could keep your health up significantly easier. Not saying you should, but I'm just saying just as an example. And in terms of like the damage, like Holster Amp is now a really odd niche. It adds additively to Vigorous Swap, last time I heard. Don't quote me on that. I know it's a nice damage boost. You can obviously run enemy radar, things like that. So just keep in mind if you're running with a squad, consider the auras, not just the team comp. The auras are basically like, where in basketball they call it like the 6th man, where it's like the team synergy and like the planning and everything. That's sort of what auras are. So consider the auras, try to have a damage, a defense, like a utility at least, and something, and make the 4th one. So say like for Grineer, Corrosive Projection, the shield mod, for Corpus, but then there's also specific things like what do you got? For mobile defense, if you're doing infested mobile defense, there's infested impedance, reduced speed of infested enemies. Pardon, sorry about that. This aura is super good for infested mobile defense. There's some niche uses on regular defense missions. Like this allows Saren to have her spores have more things nearby because things aren't sprinting away so fast. This can occasionally help if you're running frames with like max range, because it'll create sort of a perimeter where the infested bunch up in a big perimeter. So if you're running a big nuke, you can keep the infested at bay, but they'll create like a circle around you because you'll have the enemies moving slower because it's an aura, right? It affects the map. And then you'll have your damaging ability, and this will cause them to group up slightly. And I've noticed that like on enemies that are on things that are AoE, this tends to help the chaining a little bit. It's very tiny and isn't worth min-maxing over, but there have been circumstances where this has helped, specifically mobile defense, where you just don't want the infested coming at you. And obviously helping out, and this even affects like Eximus. So stuff like that So just keep that in mind. There's a bunch of stuff. Make sure to look through these. But when you're running with a group, consider the auras, because running Brief Respite on a health tank frame like Nidus, there is, and that's part of that's part of what triggered me a little bit about it. There's zero reason for a Nidus to ever run Brief Respite. I'm not going to call the person out, and I've even seen overframe builds where Nidus has Brief Respite on because somebody said it was meta. Just stop it. It's silly. Okay? But just to go over a couple other things, like say, if you know somebody, like your damage dealer, for example, like you could take Empowered Blades on somebody that is killing with heavy slash attacks. If you're the support, like this would be good with Styanax, and even how am I forgetting this from? I played the hell out of it. Equinox, right? Because it's going to be an AOE based shield recovery that applies to everybody. This mod, if you have one person getting shields back or doing the killing, on say like a disruption run or something, this mod is incredibly powerful, and in a lot of cases is stronger than a faction mod in terms of like heavy attack slash builds. Obviously that's super niche, right? But there's a bunch of stuff like that where you can stack the auras and it can significantly boost your damage, besides just like straight 4 steel charges or 4 corrosive projections. Though, to be honest, corrosive projection has sort of lost its way a bit because of how easy it is to strip armor now. Like, I was running corrosive projection on Oberon because I decided to triple Ember him. And I need the extra armor strip because the armor strip on my 4 isn't 100%, so I need corrosive projection to get the strip. But if somebody else had corrosive projection on, there's no reason for Oberon to run this. I could then swap out to something else, or the other person could swap to something else because we have a corrosive projection on the team. Though, to be honest, there's nothing really wrong with running 2 corrosive projections, especially against Grineer. But if you're against Corpus or Infested, there's literally no point to this mod. Just have a weapon that deals slash, or have Shattering Impact on your melee for the occasional unit that has armor. And obviously, against the Infested, you wouldn't really need this anyway, because there's like the Charger, and the one other unit, one of the Ancients, I think, has armor. So, food for thought. Just take a look at what the aura mods are. I would say like a perfect setup would be like a damage aura, a aura that deals with the defense of whatever you're hitting, like whatever the enemy is. So the shield aura for Corpus, corrosive projection for Grineer. If people are running like primary builds, and that's what they're choosing to kill with primarily, there's nothing wrong with running a rifle lamp. Obviously, it's not incredibly meta, but if 4 people are running like primary damage, and keep in mind the auras do differentiate between like rifles and shotguns. You need to know what everybody else is using. But if people are running Ignises and there's 4 of you, even though the bonuses are really low, you got to remember this applies 4 times to 4 people. So it boosts the entire squad's damage. So in reality, it might be 27% flat damage to you, where it stacks additively with Merciless. But it gives that 27% to 4 people. So in reality, it's more than 100% damage. Right? So it's it's like a third person almost, or what would that be? A quarter of a person. Hold on, math time. Okay, so 27 times 4 is 108. So it would be a third of a person. Yeah. Sorry, 108 divided by 30% of a person. So, because it applies to everybody, you would get the bonus across everybody. It would be like 30% of another person being on the team. So it adds up. It's small, but it's there. And especially like against Corpus, if you have the shield aura, somebody has rifle amp, somebody's running maybe like an energy siphon or a minus accuracy. Minus accuracy basically makes you. Let's see, was it that shield capacity? Not that one. I literally just had it. Here we go. Hit chance. Corpus enemy have reduced accuracy. This basically makes your entire squad 15% more tanky. Right? Actually, it's a little more than that. Hold on, more math time. Okay, so it's 1 minus 15, so obviously 85, and then you do 100 divided by 85. Okay, it makes your squad 17.6% tankier because of the missed hit. And this also stacks favorably. It's not evasion, but it does stack favorably with evasion also. Because evasion is like something that's supposed to hit you when you dodge, but if they miss you, it's a bullet you don't have to dodge. Right? So it stacks additively against Corpus. This is oddly pretty good for level caps. Obviously it's not something you would want to lean into, but if you have like a fourth person with an EMP aura on like a Corpus level cap, there's nothing wrong with it because the Corpus are so heavy on rifles, right? Like that's how they do most of their damage, and this even applies to like MOAs, which is going to be one of the units that kill you. So stuff like this, if you see 4 people running corrosive projection, you can actually run like a steel charge or like a rifle amp, or even like a utility mod. Like this is where like an enemy radar would come in handy during survivals. So you're not running around looking for enemies so much. So food for thought. I just wanted to get this PSA out there because a Nidus with a brief respite should never exist. But I've seen stuff like that like over the past 2 weeks, and I just felt it was worth a video. And like a brief respite on say like a Lavos or on like Hildren should never exist. Because it's just they don't use energy. You can't proc it. So I guess it's more of an issue of like overframe builds getting way more credit than they should, but stuff like that, just keep that in mind. You can gain additional benefits by swapping out the auras. And as much as I've heard people talk crap about enemy radar, this is super nice if you don't have a pet that can self-revive. I'm not going to lie, enemy radar, it's super nice. Don't do like enemy radar, loot radar. Like loot detector, this is a bit much. But like having a 4th slot of like enemy radar honestly is kind of a nice touch. So like the damage aura, the aura that deals with the defense, a loot radar, And you could even go like 2 auras into dealing with whatever the enemy's defense is. There's nothing wrong with that. Or do like a brief respite, 2 corrosive projections, and a loot radar. Would be like a pretty decent setup for like a squad of 4 people, especially if y'all are coordinating. Because I'm starting to see farm teams also that are wanting to do slightly longer runs where they don't want to do like a 20-30 minute run. So just keep in mind the auras are like your 6th man on the court. They can do a lot, especially with those of you that are doing like Spectre camps. I'm seeing Vauban's and Mag camps a lot. Just keep in mind with Rifle Lamp, if you have like a rifle or like a bow, Rifle Lamp and say like the Sniper Aura are really good for Spectres because this bonus applies to base damage. And that's what the Spectres scale off of. So say like you have like a Volt with a Vectus, right? The Spectre, that is, when they gain strength, it is a flat multiplier. It is an unmodded Vectus with its base damage multiplied by its level, essentially. I mean, there's an equation, but it's essentially that, right? It follows the same equation as the enemies. So if you were to take the Deadeye Sniper Aura, it would multiply the base damage of the weapon that if as long as it's a sniper by this, and then it would scale accordingly. So for stuff like that, for longer runs, there's nothing wrong with running one of these if it's like your 4th aura and you just don't want like a loot radar. So stuff like this, especially if you're doing like spam heavy builds, don't sleep on the scavenger auras. Seriously, like rifle aura, shotgun aura, sniper aura is still kind of a meme. But like if you're doing an arbitration and it's like ogress spam, my bros, take 2 or 3 of these. Okay? Take 2 or 3 of these. You can get it to the point where you can let's see, I'm running a Toncore right now. So 3 ammo prime sniper ammo mutation almost doubles it to 192. The aura stacks with this. So it doubles the ammo pickup to almost 6. The aura will add on to it. So I will go from 6 to say like 9 with 2 scavenger rifle auras. It allows you to burn through ammo. So just keep this in mind. These things exist. And give it some consideration when you're running with like a squad from the clan or alliance. I can't reiterate this enough. Just make your life easier. All of the builds that you see on YouTube, and I'm gonna do my best when I'm talking about builds to mention the primary aura that you would want if you're running solo, but also a secondary aura where if you're running with a group and say somebody on Oberon, for example, what would you want to run if somebody else on your squad had corrosive projection and you no longer need this aura? Like, for example, if I was doing a rifle build, I could then get rid of this and either take rifle amp, do a holster amp, because I'm casting abilities, right? I could also do like a loot radar or even take brief respite, because I am casting abilities with this build somewhat often, because this is more of a face tank build, right? So for something like that, you could also take like a combat discipline, because Oberon is regenning health so much. It's kind of hard to die with him at lower levels. Sorry about that. I had to clear my throat. It's kind of hard to die with him at lower levels, but when you're doing like really rapid survivals, you can overwhelm his health regen. Um, Especially when you're killing like groups of enemies when they bunch up in like a hall or something, and you kill like 20 or 30 of them at once. That's going to be 300 health, right? Um, so for stuff like that, there's definitely something to consider. But stuff like this, consider this stuff when you're playing with people from the clan and the alliance, and you're doing like a longer run. You don't, very very rarely do you need 4 people with brief respites. If you have a frame that is having trouble with shield gating, 2 people running a brief respite is generally enough. Like even with this, like 100 on the 4, on this build, I tend to cast 2 and 4 a bunch. Well, brief respite with my 2, and if I put an augur mod elsewhere on my build, will give me shield gate. And this is a quick cast. 4 is a little bit longer, but I got casting speed shards on. And this will give me an instant overshield and CC most of the enemy. I'm using the hallowed ground as like built-in CC, which is providing like some level of safety, and everything else is to prevent me from getting one shot. So for stuff like this, consider it. Very rarely do you need 4 brief respites. I can't imagine what builds you would have to put on there. It would have to be something ridiculous where you just didn't think to require 4 brief respites. Like absolutely make or break, you have to put 4 brief respites on, because that's 600%. Like you would cast, I would cast this and get 600 shield back. Like you could literally get Hildren to max shields with like 10 casts if she could even use the mod. That's so much shield, right? So stuff like that, keep it in mind. This is like the 6th person on the field, and I think I beat this to death. Just make sure to take a look through here. Pick up the ones from Nightwave. Growing Power is from the Titania quest, Forest Spectres. It's kind of out of style now because you have the Arcanes from the Zeraman. And Corrosive Projection kind of lost its swagger because of the armor changes. Like, obviously, you can throw Terrify on anything. So look into your auras. Don't worry about like putting aura mods on something. It's more something I do as like a finishing touch. But if you have somebody who's having trouble staying alive, consider changing your aura for them if you're running a couple missions. It's not a big deal. But if you're running the 4-man or woman, make sure to diversify your portfolio of auras. Because all of the builds that you see, I have never seen this mentioned in any build video of any Warframe person talking about aura mods amongst people on your squad. So consider this, because it can make or break a build. And it's just naturally something me and the people that I run like survivals with, we talk about, where we'll swap out our faction mods, you'll swap out your elements, you'll check your aura mods to make sure they stack favorably. Like, obviously, you don't want to leave corrosive projections on when you're doing, like, corpus survivals, right? You want to swap it out, and we'll go to, like, maybe, like, an energy siphon or a enemy radar, and then, or run, like, double shield disruption or something, right? Like, it's just something we naturally do. And I don't know, it was just the Nidus with brief respite. And what was the other one? It was like a Naros with Shepherd, I think. I think it was a Naros with Shepherd. And the guy wasn't even running a companion. So, food for thought, okay. No, it wasn't an Aurus with aerodynamic. Probably didn't have another D polarity. I don't know why they were running it in the first place, but that's what they had on. So, anyway, just give it some thought. There's plenty of ways these interact also. And just keep in mind when you're seeing build videos and explanations, and I'm going to put in some work, at least put a sticky note somewhere, to at least mention alternatives for the auras. Because I've never seen these talked about. Like, you'll see a build video of somebody doing like a level cap or something, and if they're on a squad, like they need to mention, like, especially if it's like a melee build, right? If they're showcasing like a melee level cap build, what's to stop them from putting 3 steel charges on the other people, right? That's a huge difference in damage. It's like having, even though they're running like condition overload, it's like adding like prime pressure point to your build for free, right? So I guess this is also continuing part of, maybe that's going to end up being a series of talking about like alternative modding. I'm going to at least try to mention it, like ways you can buff specific things. Also, don't follow this Oberon build. I know I've had this up for a bit and I've been talking over it. This is sort of a meme build. Steel path, star chart. I've already taken it up to an hour, and it's a pretty solid meme. And this is the Oberon from before, so I basically ruined my old build. Considering Oberon's coming up next month, I'm just going to build another one. But anyway, the GOAT has umbrals now. Meme complete. So just keep this in mind when you're going back to the point. Keep it in mind when you're playing with other people, especially when you can coordinate. Make sure to check your auras also, and don't always rely on a solo build when you're playing with people. Obviously, run the solo build if you're running publics, right? But if you're playing with other people and you got time to coordinate, and you're changing factions and you're just like farming something or wanting to do a longer run, make sure to consider the auras also, because I haven't seen anybody mention that. But obviously some people know, but I haven't seen anybody talk about it when doing like a long run video. But anyway, that's enough. Kept it under 50 minutes. Y'all have a blessed day. I'm out for today. See you guys tomorrow.